my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill.
The 90s granted us a large supply of horror games like never before. This included long-lasting titles such as the Common Culture series, Resident Evil, and Silent Hill. We also were granted titles that eventually dwindled in midair, like Alone in the Dark, Parasite Eve, and Clock Tower. The 2000s would revamp itself, giving us survival staples that have inspired and shaped many future horror games for all consoles. These iconic games include Resident Evil 4, Dead Space, and Fatal Frame. Today, however, we'll talk about one of the most influential horror games to be released. And yes, I know I just mentioned Resident Evil 4, but that game is influential in many different ways. Today, we will be entering the world of Silent Hill 2. Alright guys, so here we have some of the Silent Hill 2 editions, including the Black Label Silent Hill 2 for the PlayStation 2, the Greatest Hits edition for the PlayStation 2, which we'll talk about in a few, and the not so great PlayStation 3 copy of Silent Hill 2. Let's go ahead and unbox these. Alright, so here we have a copy of the one and only Silent Hill 2. In my opinion, this is definitely the definitive way to play this game, as this was the original port, and it is awesome. As we open it, we have the amazing manual, which are great to look at, so if you do have a copy, be sure to skim through it since it's really cool, as well as the original Black Label disc. Next up, we have Silent Hill 2 Greatest Hits Edition. Now, Silent Hill 2 Greatest Hits Edition is definitely a must-have because it includes the sub-scenario, Born from a Wish, that features antagonist Maria. And finally, we have the worst way to play Silent Hill, which is on the PS3 port. This port actually didn't have all the code files for Silent Hill 2, therefore it is not the full original port. This is the worst way to play both of these games. If you have to, you have to, but if you don't do it. It's not worth it. Anyways, let's get on to the video, shall we? On September 21st, 2001, Silent Hill 2 was released for the PlayStation 2. SH2 was one of the first horror games to ever be released on the console, the system only being about a year and a half old at this point. Comparing the SH2 release trailer to another early horror game release like Extermination, we see that the difference is absolutely insane from a glance. Not saying that Extermination looks bad, but the fact that both of these games came out in the same year showed which game would noticeably have longevity over the other. Unfortunately, horror games in general for that time did have a lot of poor releases, hence why the survival horror genre has skyrocketed in prices for a physical copy of certain titles. To this day, the graphics hold up extremely well. The same goes for the CGI cutscenes too. Something interesting to point out is that when the name Hideo Kojima comes up, many people like to identify the series with him. Kojima revitalized the series, no doubt, giving us PT, a playable demo released in 2014, later discovered as Silent Hills. The demo is still considered to be one of the most scariest horror games ever, even with it being a demo. While Kojima did greatly impact the series as a whole, many people tend to forget about the original creators of the series and give all the praise to him, when in fact he contributed a small part to a much bigger production. Team Silent was a team of 10. Created by the large company Konami. The team was a group of people who had failed in other projects, stated by Akira Yamaoka, which is very ironic given the fact that their first creation together, Silent Hill, was a massive success. A team of outcasts that became heroes to many. The team would create the first 4 games in the series and would eventually disband to work on other projects such as Forbidden Siren. Team Silent would be inspired by many pop culture icons such as David Lynch and Alfred Hitchcock, even having some scenes resemble ones from movies. The Silent Hill games have their own separate stories, which is why it's okay to start with the second game first. That and the fact that the first game is on the PS1. The main 3 titles are all featured on the same console. Silent Hill 3, however, decided to be a continuation of 1, since fans were displeased that the first game didn't have a proper continuation or satisfying ending for the characters. Silent Hill 2 starts off with a man looking at himself in the mirror. We discover that this man is our main playable character, James Sunderland, who is looking for his wife in the town of Silent Hill. His journey starts after receiving a letter from Mary, who says she's waiting for him at their special place. The only issue with this whole situation is that, well, Mary died 3 years ago. James picks up his map and has no choice but to enter the fog, unaware of what's on the other side, all in hopes of reuniting with his wife again. Silent Hill 2 is a psychological horror. Games like Resident Evil focused more on survival horror and scary gameplay, while this game focuses more on symbolism instead of the constant jump scares. But don't let that piece of information throw you off though. This game has many scenes that will make you jump for sure. While the town of Silent Hill is just a figment of James's imagination, it is shown to be different for everyone in the town. We'll get more into that later though. James doesn't care about what's in the town. For his wife, he'll go deeper and deeper into the abyss. It primarily centers around guilt and punishment. But what is James so guilty for, we wonder? There's one part of the game nearing the end that will always stick with me the most. While exploring a prison, James comes across a hole. You can't see what's on the bottom, only darkness. The game asks you whether you want to jump down or not. However, it's the only way to go. James decides to go down a few holes, and I feel like that's the best way to describe this game. Going deeper and deeper into the unknown, to the point where you fail to realize just how lost you are. Empty, dreadful, yet still determined to explore. So why play this game if it sounds so depressing? Well, for one, it's a horror game, but not many other games have been able to pull off horror and storytelling so well. A game that is able to incorporate its characters, settings, and enemies all into one main character. It's impressive and most importantly unique. Everything is in this game for a reason, and that allows you to connect the dots as the game goes on, all whilst solving puzzles and making sure your health isn't low. The gameplay is something that's a little tricky to talk about. It's not bad, but it could be better. Then again, for its time, it did its job. Comparing it to Resident Evil, that game relied on its fixed camera angles and tank controls to allow jump scares and closed spaces. This game has tank controls. The main difference is that it's a third-person view with a moving camera. In terms of jump scare factors, the game relies on the field of view. You're walking down a dark hall, you can't see anything, but there's only one way to go. This means you might or might not jump into something along the way. The same goes for the outside in the misty fog. The game relies on your fear of the unknown, something people struggle with in their real lives too. For most of the game, dodging enemies is the best thing players can do. The only time that combat is really necessary is when you're fighting during a boss battle, or playing on a higher difficulty level. There isn't that much going on in terms of combat, like most survival horrors, and the gameplay aspect lacks a bit. That's probably the weakest part of this game, but it's not terrible, so don't toss it out just because it's not top tier gameplay. That being said, most of the boss battles just have you running around one room, stopping and shooting every few seconds until it's over. James starts off with a wooden plank, but eventually upgrades to weapons such as a steel pipe, handgun, shotgun, chainsaw, and hunting rifle. Some weapons are pretty useless like the hyper spray, but some weapons can be secretly great, like the great knife. The great knife is pretty interesting, since it's the other half of the enemy Pyramid Head's knife, both combining to be a giant pair of scissors. The knife makes you really slow, but allows you to throw such mega powerful hits. When James does decide to make his attack, he is stuck in place, so always be mindful which weapon you're using and how many enemies are surrounding you. On normal mode, enemies are usually downed in about 3 to 5 hits, but don't let that fool you. Just because they're down doesn't mean they're fully dead yet. Always go for a double tap just to make sure. Items are scarce, like health and ammunition. You have a radio on your jacket that gets louder when an enemy is near. A flashlight is another item that you have equipped throughout the game. The previous game included snow, yes, snow, mainly for the lack of hardware power on the PS1, thus having fog to hide the unrendered parts of the game as you run through. The team embraced this aspect, changing up the snow to fog, which helped just as much as it did for the first title. Silent Hill 2 does require you to use your big old brain to complete puzzles, even puzzles that take forever to complete, only to give you such a painful reward. This game always knows how to mess with you. The puzzles are pretty spaced out throughout the entirety of the game, and come at just the right times. I can say that it's already a puzzle enough trying to navigate through the halls. Free the Innocent Man is one of my favorite puzzles in this game. You're given a small piece of text and a room filled with 6 nooses. With that riddle, you need to figure out which noose should be pulled in order to get through the area. It's a really cool puzzle when you reach it, trust me. When you mix cheesiness and dramatic acting, you get a good game. Plain and simple. Silent Hill 2 does have some extremely unforgettable characters that are even included in popular games today, such as Dead by Daylight. The cheesy delivery in some dialogue scenes gives this game its charm. It's also nice to just breathe for a second before re-entering the gates of hell.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
Have you ever heard of the term psychosis? Well, psychosis is when you lose touch with reality, believing and seeing things that aren't true. This word is the best way to describe our main character, James Sunderland, a man that seems to be out of touch with reality for the majority of the game. James's outfit is actually an homage to the character Jacob Singer from Jacob's Ladder, who seems to be rocking a jacket almost identical to Sunderland's. Guy Seehee, the voice actor of James, had actually gone to the Silent Hill casting call because he was bringing his daughter to the audition for the role of Laura. Intrigued, he then decided to audition himself for the character of James. The team thought that Guy was exactly what they envisioned and he got the part. James is a guilty man who is not on a journey to find his wife. He's on a journey of continuous punishment. James tries to reassure himself of Mary's death, yet he lies to himself that Mary is still somewhere in this town. He doesn't react to the unusual things he sees, like monsters or dead bodies, and is extremely nonchalant. He knows Mary died 3 years ago, yet his demeanor is completely changed when he thinks he finds her. James is constantly questioning himself, looking for an answer that has already been answered, just not accepting what reality is. Spoiler alert, James killed his wife and is just living out his punishment for being a selfish man. You follow him throughout the whole game thinking he's this hero, doing whatever it takes to find his wife, yet the whole time you're the enemy. Even with this information, people still love James though. You can't lie, James is a great character, and yeah, he's a little mentally ill, but he's silly, so. Do I look like your dead wife? Well, yes. Maria is the one and only doppelganger of James's wife, Mary. Maria is a recurring character that you'll see in the majority of the game. As James approaches a part of Toluca Lake, he sees a woman standing there and staring out into the fog. She appears to look like Mary. He jumps with excitement for a second before realizing that it's not her. She looks like her twin. The only difference is her style and appearance. We then find out that she's not Mary, but Maria. Maria off the bat is shown to have manipulative tendencies, making James feel obligated to protect Maria. All from this comment.
Coming with me?
You were gonna just leave me?
No, but...
With all these monsters around?
No, I just...
I'm all alone here. Everyone else is gone. I look like Mary, don't I? You loved her, right? Or maybe you hated her.
Maria wears an outfit that is inspired by one of Christina Aguilera's outfits. It's an outfit that's way more sexualized than Mary's outfit compared in the game. The outfit symbolizes the sexual frustration that James had desired from Mary, but can no longer have. What's really interesting is that after playing this game, you can play the sub-scenario Born from a Wish, which follows Maria's character. It's honestly really sad trying to see this character navigate through the town when we know she's not really real, only a manifestation of James's mind. A person that might not even know they're real with no sense of self-identity. This extra content came out a little bit after the game, however is a great addition for adding complexity to this character. Mary is the late wife of James. With the little we see of Mary throughout the game, she is seen to be happy and peaceful. Mary unfortunately becomes ill with a terminal disease and doesn't have any treatment that can fully save her. The last place she was ever happy was at Silent Hill. We first meet Eddie throwing up in a toilet, claiming that he didn't kill the person that we just discovered outside the room. Eddie is a clear example of bad mental health. Eddie is shown to have body dysmorphia, something that he's been struggling with for many years of his life. Every time we encounter Eddie, he seems to get more insane, stating that he killed a person because he didn't like the way the person looked at him. In his manifestation of the town, he sees monsters too, but his enemies are mainly the people related to his past. He's in the town because he's on the run. He talks to Laura about how the cops probably wouldn't be on his side, so it would be best to just leave, implying that he must have hurt someone. When meeting James for the final time, he starts to yell words out like fat, relating to his body dysmorphia that he struggled with, and how that has been one of the things that have taken a toll on his mental health for so many years. Eddie is eventually at the point of no return, having a final gun battle with James, giving Sunderland no choice but to gun him down. I find it surprising how many people love Angela. Playing the game for the first time, I didn't really care for Angela, as she was just a side character to me. After really examining her character though, I can understand why people favor her the most. Angela has to have one of the most heartbreaking stories for a character. Angela has been brought to the town looking for her mother. Off the bat when meeting her, you can tell that there's something wrong. She's shy and nervous, seen to be fearful of James, given that he's a man. As we learn more about her character, we find out about her horrid childhood. Angela had been sexually abused by her brother and father. She ultimately stabbed her father to death, getting some sense of justice for the years of constant torment. When running into her again, we see her with a knife across from a mirror. Angela is shown to be suicidal and depressed, with nothing but a sense of hopelessness. For me, it's always like this, is a quote that alters the story majorly. This is finally where we get to understand how different the town can look from person to person. Angela sees this place as a fiery pit of hell at all times. Because of her PTSD, she's shown to have a much angrier demeanor, but for good reason. I only hope that Angela finds peace one day. Laura is the young girl we see stumble upon a lot through the game. Because of her young self, she has no shame in being extremely blunt with the people around her, such as Eddie and James. She and James don't have the best relationship, and that's because Lisa was good friends with Mary. While Mary was sick waiting for James, he would often not come, and instead would have Laura to confide in. This is one of the reasons why Laura is so hostile towards James, even throwing him in a room filled with enemies. Laura was intended to be adopted by Mary, but given the unfortunate circumstances, that was never the case. Laura is a good placement in the game, especially towards characters like James, because she serves as a wake-up call. A wake-up call that James is not a good person and he did something very bad. A small fun fact about this game is its connection to Silent Hill 4: The Room. Antagonist Walter Sullivan from Silent Hill 4 is mentioned in this game from a set of documents found early in the town. Sullivan is mentioned in documents about his suicide in his jail cell. Sullivan had committed the terrible murder of 2 children, which are more popularly known in Silent Hill 4 to be the twin victims. While exploring one of the areas of the game, you might notice a lying corpse with a spoon by its side. This is theorized to be Walter Sullivan. As speculated though, this person might be impersonating Walter, so who knows what Team Silent was actually going for. Lastly, another cool connection is the fact that James Sunderland's father is also featured in Silent Hill 4 and is the superintendent of South Ashfield Heights. I love the fact that the enemies in this game feature a lot more to them than just their surface levels. Themes of sexual frustration, abuse, and guilt are all recurring themes that show up a lot in these enemies. Team Silent took heavy inspiration from artists such as Francis Bacon and Han Belmer. Pyramid Head is a pop culture icon in this day and age. People consider him a father figure now, and sexualize him, but for many other reasons which I won't get into. Pyramid Head is also known as the Red Pyramid Head, and symbolizes James's guilt and punishment. He shows up in the game often, taunting James with what he deserves. He has a giant pyramid helmet on his head to dehumanize him, making the enemy more disturbing. He carries a great knife or spear throughout your encounters. The Lion figure is the first enemy we encounter in the game. The enemy resembles a person in a straitjacket, as we can't see its arms, its flesh tying it all together. This enemy has a habit of spraying poisonous mist at its enemy, so it's best to steer clear of it. The Lion figure is really there to represent another example of James's suffering, being trapped in this eternal punishment. The mannequin is a mannequin, and probably one of the more scarier first enemy encounters, as it stands still in one of its awkward positions, waiting for you to get closer. The mannequin resembles an actual mannequin dummy, but instead has 2 bottom halves connected together, giving it 4 legs instead of 2. Nurses are one of those enemies that seem to carry over from the first game. Their appearances have been altered though, compared to the first game. They are one of the staple enemies in the series. That being said, these nurses are referred to as the Bubblehead Nurse. When examining them closer, you notice that their outfits are a bit more revealing, symbolizing sexual guilt of James, something that he couldn't fulfill with Mary being sick. The term bubble in question is supposed to represent the aftermath of James killing Mary through the suffocation of a pillow, bubble implying swollen. An enemy that's finally not tied with James. Abstract Daddy is related to the story of Angela. As previously mentioned before, this enemy is meant to resemble 2 figures on a bed committing a sexual act, with skin stretched across the whole frame. If you want to look at this enemy in relation to James, however, then it would be another symbolic representation of James's sexual frustration combined with Mary being bedridden. Fleshlip will always be an enemy that I remember, due to how utterly random the boss encounter is. You're essentially fighting feet that might pick you up and attack you if you get too close. Yes, very random, to say the least. Fleshlip is a humanoid-looking enemy that dangles above the ceiling as you fight it. The enemy has moving lips on its body which can either resemble regular lips or vaginal lips, connecting the enemy to the common sexual theme shown in all the other monsters. It can also connect to something else, connecting with the word flesh, but I don't want this video to be taken down, so I won't continue any further. The lips are of course connected to Mary and her conversations with James, as well as the bars being another type of way to show how Mary was bedridden. The last enemy we will be talking about today is the one and only Mary. Yes, at the end of the game you fight your wife. Very ironic, huh? Mary's transformation figure resembles Flesh Lips' design in terms of the bar and her being high up when you fight her. We are also hinted at how she might look beforehand, as we see Maria in a similar position a little while before. Mary will ultimately be a different character and will fight differently depending on which ending you get. This will depend on your choices throughout the entirety of the game, especially with your relationship with Maria. Locations are one of my favorite aspects of this game. Unfortunately, I am not the biggest fan of Silent Hill 3, and that's because I dread most of its locations. Silent Hill 2 by far has much more interesting locations to look at, combined with the ambience each one holds. The fog world is the other world, the world that has brought James here in the first place. The whole town of Silent Hill is surrounded by this fog, which puts the location in a dreamlike state, whether this is reality or something fake. The fog is ultimately a primary symbol of Silent Hill. The Blue Creek apartment complex is a location that still haunts me to this day. It's the first time in the game that the player realizes there's no going back. The scary starts here. Like all the other areas, this place is a maze. Having a map is crucial to not being lost at all times, so it's best that you pick that up before you start exploring. There are many locked doors, not just for this area, but for most of the locations. The corridors are extremely tight, forcing you to have encounters with the enemies, all while navigating in the dark. The area sets up the tone of the game, combined with having an extremely balanced set of puzzles, rooms, and enemies. Brookhaven Hospital is pretty similar in terms of structure. Same goes for the Lakeview Hotel. Both of these locations manage to have amazing ambience and balanced structures to keep the player intrigued even till the end. The prison is a maze, but an amazing entry level. This level plays with the character's psyche, as jumping through dark and scary holes is a big factor during this part of the game. The prison is located deep down beneath Toluca Lake, which is discovered when ascending an extremely long staircase. The drops of musty water that fall to the floor only heighten the player's anxiety as we fear what might be so deep down below. A standout would have to be the labyrinth. Boy, did I get lost quite a few times while playing through this level. To put it plainly, this area is a maze that has you going in loops. As you enter deeper into the abyss, the maze is yet a prime example of how James might be feeling at that given moment. No sense of clear direction, aimlessly wandering back and forth, praying for an entrance closer to Mary. I love that they included this area, as it throws the player off from standard gameplay that the player has already gotten comfortable with. Heaven's Night is a location you visit during your time in the town. The reason why I put this one on the list is because of its relation to Maria, a place that feels like a dream, combined with its special Heaven's Night theme. This is a club. Its design was inspired by the likes of the movie Blue Velvet. From what we know, Maria lives above the club and was most likely a stripper there. Now what makes this interesting is that in Silent Hill 3 we get to explore Heaven's Night for a bit. There is a flyer that says, "The Return of Lady Maria." If we examine the poster, however, we notice that this does not look like the Maria we knew in the second game, implying that there might have been an actual real Maria that worked at Heaven's Night, other than James's manifestation. We also see a different poster of Heaven's Night with Maria's face on it at the start of the game. I brought up Angela's room for this part just because of the complexity this room shares with her. This is where we find out a lot about Angela's character. When entering the room, we see her curled up next to the boss, Abstract Daddy, who is represented to be her father. The room has you running around from corner to corner, as if you're Angela running away from her abusive father. A claustrophobic experience, with holes in walls going in and out, symbolizing some sexual act. It's extremely disturbing, which can be hard for some viewers to watch as Angela sits there, kicking Abstract Daddy after James kills him. Composer Akira Yamaoka has created one of the greatest and most influential video game soundtracks ever. This soundtrack is pure gold. It's melancholic, dreadful, sad, and beautiful all at the same time. Akira properly correlates this music with the heavy themes in the story. Not only that, but the sound design is top tier. It makes up a lot of the ambience of the game and helps players fully emerge in the environment around them. Each piece is perfectly placed, setting the mood of each scene. Some of my favorites include Promise, Pianissimo Epilogue, and Heaven's Night.
僕が自分でサウンドをクリエイトするときって特にその映画を見たり何かのサウンドを聞いてインスピレーションっていうのは僕はあまりそういうのはないんですね。自分で作りたいと思ってサウンド、ギター持って例えばこう弾いて自分の中で納得するまで時間をかけて作るっていうことですかね。そうですね。きっかけっていうのは特になくて、テーマソングに関して言えば3日間ぐらいずっと家にこもってずっとこう弾いていたっていうのはあります。
Silent Hill 2 features a whopping 6 endings. Talk about replayability for sure. The endings are primarily based on your relationship with Mary and Maria, as well as how you treat James's mental stability. For example, Maria can't die when you're with her, but you can try your best to protect her. Things like this will alter your ending. Another example is a hall you enter where you hear Mary's voice during a flashback, talking to James. You can either walk slowly and listen to the entire thing, or not care and just run through the hall. On my first playthrough, I actually ran quickly through that hall because I thought the audio would carry over to the next room, but I was wrong. There's a website that I'll link below that gives you all the points on how to get each ending. The leave ending is where James decides he wants to live and leaves. The Maria ending is where James forms a much stronger bond with Maria than intended, settling for her instead. The in-water ending is where James commits suicide by drowning himself and accepts his faith with Mary. The rebirth ending is one you can only get if you've completed the game and has James trying to revive Mary. The dog ending is James finding out that it was the dog's fault.
お前の仕業だったのか?
And the UFO ending is aliens, plus Harry from the first game picking up James. Silent Hill 2 is a game that took a chance and succeeded. It's a game that gives you the answer at the start of the game without realizing it. Silent Hill 2 is a staple of the horror genre and will always be. For years, people have tried to recreate its magic, and while there have been some notable games throughout the years, it's really hard to top something so influential and perfect. Silent Hill 2 will continue to live up to its legacy.